Hi everybody, today I will talk in this new episode of Berend Talks Watches about a very special subject with one of my good friends and one of the most knowledgeable persons I know. Today we're talking Tudor Chronographs with my good friend Ross Povey. Hi Ross, how are you doing, mate?
I'm great, Berend. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, doing well. Just
Awesome.
getting a bit into a new lockdown again, but
Yeah,
we're doing fine, we're coping fine. We have
good.
beautiful watches to look at.
I'm excited about this. I
Yeah.
love Tudors and I love chronographs. So
Yeah.
this is the perfect conversation for me to have with you.
Yeah, we were just talking lately about it, and I think it's one of the most important subjects in the vintage watch scene that many people forget about, I think. But it's important to know because it's really also a part big of history from Tudor and Rolex itself, but also in the watch industry. Tudor were really like pioneers on this area with these watches. But let's start first. Which watch are you wearing today?
Today on my wrist, I have the most
Cool.
recent chronograph from Tudor, the Black Bay Chrono
The
Dark.
Darth Vader.
Yeah, it's a cool watch, and it's got a very cool story because it's possibly the only officially sanctioned limited edition watch to ever come out of the Wilsdorf stable. So initially, it was launched in around about 1,100 pieces.
That's crazy.
The story behind it being that there's one watch made for every person who has ever played rugby for their national side of New Zealand. So I think that I'm not sure exactly, but I think they'll probably cap, which is when you get asked to play for your country. I think there'll be probably maybe 6 or 7 watches made per year.
Wow, that's great.
And each watch is numbered. And the very cool thing that I discovered recently is that on Wikipedia there is a list of all the players in order of how they were called up for the country. Yes, so
cool.
I will reveal for the first time today on this video with you that I actually have watch number 9 from the run, which is cool, nice low number. And so I can go onto Wikipedia and look who the 9th ever person who was capped for New Zealand was, and that's kind of the story behind it. So I'm going to write about that on Tudor Collector in the not too distant future. So this is
really looking forward to that. Wow, that's cool. Yeah, I really love that watch. I love the look of it. It just looks so stealth, and like I said, it just looks like you are wearing Darth Vader on your wrist. I think it's one of the coolest modern Tudors, really. I'm also wearing a modern Tudor today, which is the Black Bay, the very rare one with the Eta movement. I really love that watch. I think it's, especially when I go on holiday, just put it onto a NATO strap, go swimming, diving. I think it's one of the coolest modern watches too. I think Tudor really nailed it, of course, with the Black Bay line itself, but also with this one. I think it. I really love that watch.
Yeah, very interesting watch, made for a very, very short period of time. So it was one of the kind of traditionally what I guess we would call like a mid-year release. Traditionally, Tudor released their watches in Baselworld in March, April time. And then occasionally would release watches. This is all pre-COVID. The world's very different now. But then would occasionally release a watch in November. And I remember very well being at the launch of this watch, the Black Bay Black, the original Mark 1. And they launched that in the November. But then in Baselworld, 3 months later, they announced the in-house movement, which was available straight away. So that original Mark 1 watch with the Eta movement, I think was maybe made for 3-4 months most. So you can break that down to maybe 12, 13 weeks of production. So to me, a very, very cool watch.
Yeah, I think especially with the big crown and also the smiley on the dial, I think it's one of the coolest Black Bays.
Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah, great.
Perfect. But let's talk about the Tudor Chronos and maybe talk about one of the most rare and also popular Tudor Chronos, which everybody knows about, which is this one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a stunning watch, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, the 7000 series, the home plate. Crazy watch.
Yeah. Where it all began.
Yeah. I think, is this one of the coolest designs ever made, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I think it's a really very, very interesting watch. The first chronograph ever to come out of Tudor.
Yeah.
And what a launch. Those watches, to me, they're now known as the home plate by collectors, due to the shape of the hour markers that
they're like in the shape of the home plate, where the people from the baseball game stand on. And also it just looks like a little home. Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah, it's cool. I'd never thought of that. It does look like you've got there a 7032.
Yes.
Which has the steel bezel. I've actually got here with me my 7031 with the black plastic tachymeter bezel. So there were these two versions. Yes. And I've never thought about that. It does look like a little home, doesn't it? Like a little kid's drawing of a house.
Yeah, cool.
Excellent.
Right? Yeah, and many people see it as sort of the Paul Newman Daytona of Tudor, and I think that's really a good comparison because they're super rare. They're only produced for 1 year, but also it just sort of looks like, with the outer track, sort of looks like the Paul Newman dials. And I think this is a far cooler watch than the Paul Newman, because the Paul Newmans are so hyped at the moment, and these are sort of still a little bit underappreciated. But I think this is sort of comes close to the best of the 70s, I would say. Like, some people might think of that I'm one of the biggest fans of the Rolex Explorer 2, the 1655. It's one of my favorite Rolex references, and I think this is sort of like, if you look to it, sort of the brother of it. With the color combination, the crazy dial. Yeah. Yeah, it's such
very, very 70s. The grey and orange and black was hugely popular at that time. That particularly we see quite a lot from that era. The orange stopwatch hand center, stopwatch chrono hand, and I mean, to me, it's a very cool watch. There's no question that over the years, steel chronographs have become hugely collectible and very popular with collectors, and we see these watches a lot. And I think steel chronographs is kind of Tudor's main output with these watches. Recently, we've seen the steel and gold models, but traditionally they solely produced chronographs in steel, and I think it makes them a very interesting proposition. And also, I like the link with the Newman, because the Newman is an icon in itself, isn't it? And really certainly since the sale of Newman's Newman, we've seen Paul Newman dial Daytona has just become
crazy valuable the last year. It's stunning.
Crazy watches. But actually, interestingly, they're not particularly rare watches.
No.
Desirable, yes. Rare, no. And I mean, these watches were made for maybe 1 year. And they are not at the price level of Paul Newman's, but they're certainly, I guess, Tudor's equivalent. And you mentioned earlier, the rarity of them. Yeah, I think they are rare watches. I think it's rare to find them in very good condition as well.
Yeah, that's true. Especially the ones with the black bezel.
Yeah. The black bezel was quite delicate. So, finding nice 703 is not easy. And then I guess looking at rarity and interest in these watches, there's the black dial home plate, which is again until recently been almost mythical. I mean, I compare it to almost like the Oyster Sotto, the RCO
really, that's a good comparison,
black dial Newman. I think the black dial home plate is the equivalent from the Tudor chronograph range, but very, very good looking watches, very special.
The black dial is beautiful. I think it's really stunning. If you see that watch on pictures, I've never seen one in live, but I mean, that's just like, it would be great to own both, but I think the black dial is super cool.
Yeah, it is. I mean, a lot of questions about where that dial came from, and there's a lot of discussion on forums and social media about them. My personal belief is that those dials were potentially sent out because the grey dials were prone to blistering and spotting. And I think they were sent out fairly quickly to ADs, authorised dealers, for them to sell. And I think two things may have happened. I think when buyers went in to buy the watches, these watches weren't huge huge immediate successes. And I don't think the authorized dealers sold them all very quickly. And so I think people were probably given the option to have grey or black. And I think that's how genuinely some of these original owner black dial watches have come to market. I've seen 2 examples that I know came from original owners who bought them in that configuration, and it's a great looking watch.
Yeah, I think it's one of the coolest and most funky watches there is. Yeah, really cool. Yeah. And if we're talking about dial cores, you get this one, which is sort of the next version of the home plate. Yeah. Which also was made with the blue dial, with the blue and orange dial. Yeah. Which I think it's the best summer watch you can buy.
Yeah. I think it's a great looking watch. So 1971 the Monte Carlo series came out, or the 7100 series. I mean, a lot of these nicknames came from collectors. So Monte Carlo, home plate, big block. These were never names used by Tudor. They used Oyster Date Chronograph as their official title for these watches. But Monte Carlo, because the dials resemble the roulette tables
of the Monte Carlo
Monaco's gambling centre.
Yeah, and from now on we see that the home plate markers are gone, but they're sort of like rectangular shaped markers. Yeah. The dial is a little bit different, but I think it's just as cool. It's sort of kept the completely funkiness of the home plate dial. But also we see now which is this bezel, which is the newest bezel, which is the rotating bezel. Yeah. And I think that one looks super cool because on a Daytona you won't get this type of bezel, which I think really suits the Tudor chronograph very well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think those bezels, that's the reference 7169 in your hand there. And that bezel added another dimension to the chronograph for Tudor. Interestingly, there is a prototype of a 7033, so it's 7031 with the black plastic tachometer bezel, 7032 with the brushed steel tachometer. There was a prototype 7033 with the 12-hour rotating bezel as well, which Tudor have shown a few times in their museum.
I saw the pictures, which is also a complete beast, isn't it? Yeah, really cool. And these two are like sort of brothers. But then we step into another dimension of the chronographs, which is this one.
Yeah, the big block.
The big block, which is a very important watch, isn't it?
Hugely so, yeah. I mean, 1976 was a really important year for the Tudor chronograph because it went automatic. And there's an important point to make here that was 12 years ahead of Rolex.
That's really crazy. If you think about it, 12 years before the Daytona, that's...
Yeah. Because the Daytona, became automatic with the Zenith, the modified Zenith movement in 1988. So Tudor were way ahead in 1976 with the automatic self-winding big block.
Yeah, it's crazy. If you look at it, and also it's called the big block because you know this. The case is thicker because otherwise the movement wouldn't fit. And I think that really, if you put it on your wrist, you really feel that. It's sort of like putting a sea dweller on your wrist in terms of thickness. It really has that sort of more heavy weight on your wrist, and I think it has more sort of a thicker look to it. I think you really notice it in comparison to, for example, this one. Yeah. And I think it also kept the really funkiness. This was also a Monte Carlo, as you know. Yeah. But also they made one with the black dial, silver dial, and also the blue dial, which is super rare, the blue dial. Yeah. Which I think also is one of the coolest. And that's also one thing with Tudor, like Rolex never did these kind of dials, except from the Explorer 2, these kind of funky colored dials. They also always had... especially in Daytona, Submariners, black dials, silver dials, in the later Daytonas, white dials. But they never went really crazy like this. And that's, I think, which makes the Tudor so cool.
Yeah, definitely. And, the big block was revolutionary. It kept the really, as you're saying, the really funky dials, the black and the blue. And interestingly, they had two different styles of dial. They kept the Monte Carlo's painted indexes, but on the blue and grey models and black and grey and orange models. But there was the glossy black dial as well with the applied hour markers that you've got in your hand there, which I think is a great watch. So the addition of the third register as well is important. The hour counter being there. And it was the biggest case that either Rolex or Tudor had made up, and I think until the Deep Sea Dweller, I think that held that record as being the kind of the biggest, proportionally the biggest oyster case that had come out of either brand. So an important watch, and being automatic, it was a real coup for Tudor to do that.
Yeah, I really think it's one of the coolest chronographs, but also one of the most important. And later they stepped actually away from the exotic dials like the Monte Carlo blue and orange dial. They just made the silver and black dials, which I think is one of the best valuable and accessible chronographs there is, and one of the coolest. If you think about it, just like it sort of gives the vibe and the coolness of a Daytona, but just like with a completely different price, which I think really makes that very accessible and cool. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, we know by the end of the 80s, before the Zenith Daytona was introduced, sales of the manual wind Daytona were very, very, very slow, very poor. Partly, I think, because it was manual wind, partly because of the size. And I think what the big block offered was a watch that was much bigger and was automatic. And I think in that era, people wanted a really rugged sports watch. And the screw down pushers. Interestingly, Tudor never made a pump pusher chrono.
No.
It always oyster case chronos with the screw down pushers and the trip lock crown.
That's very interesting.
Twin lock with the home plate. But yeah, I mean, it was a serious sports watch that you could dive in, essentially.
Yeah, crazy.
And they were great watches and have become very collectible over the last few years. It's like anything, isn't it? I always feel I guess all brands are a little bit like this, but it's certainly noticeable with Tudor and Rolex, is that collectors move chronologically through watches. So the home plate was always the king of the chronos, and then when home plates started to become incredibly expensive, people moved on to the Monte Carlos. Then the Monte Carlos started to become very expensive, so people went to the big blocks, and now the big blocks are becoming expensive. I think people are now starting to look a lot more at the fourth series, the sapphire glass 79200 series chronos.
I think they're really cool too.
Yeah.
Also, I like. I've seen many people disliking the Tiger dials, but I think they're cool too. I really like.
I think they'll have their moment. I get asked a lot about the Tiger dials. In the early 90s, the chrono changed quite significantly. And maybe due to the success of the Daytona in 1988, Tudor remodeled the case. Collectors have started calling these watches small blocks now. And the case is much more streamlined, much more like the Daytona.
The cases look like very similar to the Daytona cases.
Yeah, they do. Sapphire glass. Well, interesting, they kept the 3 bezel types. But there were some linked with Tiger on the dial, which was later on linked to the fact that Tiger Woods was an endorsee of the brand. So.
Yeah, I really think they're really cool. And also, if you're like thinking about buying a chronograph and you like Daytonas, I think they're a really good option.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great watch. I particularly like the funky dial colours. I mean, Tudor have always played with colour. That's one of the marks of the brand.
Yeah, that's one of their USPs. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think some of those fourth series chronos with the bright dials, yellow, orange, blue, red, with the matching leather straps, very similar to the Daytona Beach, the Tudor Beach. Yeah. Those watches are fantastic.
Really cool watches.
And still great value in the market. Yeah. And I think the Tudor dials, initially people didn't, even as recently as 2 or 3 years ago, people wanted the Prince Date version or the Oyster Date version, which was the earliest version of them. But I've seen now a huge rise in popularity of the Tiger watches, because it's something different. It's a bit unusual, you know. Can you imagine now, you know, the brand putting the name, if we had like Beckham or Gaga on the dials of the watch?
That would be crazy.
I don't see that ever happening again. No. So it was a unique time in the history of the brand, and I think, you know, there was some dive watches at the time. The Tudor Submariner had gone and it'd been replaced by the Hydronaut, and some of those have Tiger on the dial. So yeah, it was an interesting time. I think these watches that have been overlooked for so many years are starting to have their moment, as, going back to what I said 5 minutes ago, collectors move chronologically through the brand's history. So they're great watches.
Yeah, really cool. And if we're talking about more modern chronographs and Tudor watches, we both know the people from Tudor very well. We both know just how much passion they put into their watches, and also they're just not like they run the company, but they're also like collectors and vintage watch lovers themselves, which you can really see back into the Black Bay line and also into this one. You just showed the completely black version, but this one is the one in steel.
Yes.
Which I think is a very cool watch too. It's 41 millimeters instead of the 40 what it used to be. Also, this is of course with the sapphire crystal. But I think what's so cool is about these watches that they put in the vintage sort of hints into it, like with the rivet bracelet, and also just 2 chrono subdials again, which I think is really cool. Snowflake hands, of course. And I think this is one of the coolest modern watches too. Also in the Black Bay line. And next to this one, we also have the Heritage Chrono line, which you can also see the home plate version again, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, I'll never forget in 2010 when Tudor relaunched itself essentially. It doesn't seem like it was 10 years ago, 11 years ago now. But yeah, when they launched that watch, it was unbelievable. The reaction was like nothing I'd ever seen. 2010 the Heritage line was launched, and the first watch was the Heritage Chrono, based on the home plate, with that incredible jacquard weave fabric strap, as well as the steel bracelet. I remember your dad got the first one in the white,
I just still remember his column on his blog about it. Really cool.
Yeah, and it was incredible. That watch was based on the original home plate, but interestingly, they decided to base it on the prototype, and that was the first time that they shared that watch. And there'd been rumours of that watch for many, many years, but it was great to see it with the rotating bezel, and what a great watch. And then I think 2 years later, there was the re-edition of the Chrono Blue, which was essentially a reimagining of the Monte Carlo, the blue and orange Monte Carlo. And again, just superb watches, both of them. And then more recently, the Black Bay chronograph as part of the Black Bay family with the snowflake hands. And I think, you know, the great thing about modern Tudor is that it appeals to a wide audience. If you love vintage watches, there's a chrono for you. If you like modern watches, there's a chrono for you. It's a great fusion. There's a great selection. You know, whatever your preference, it can be met through these watches. And with the value of home plates being what they are now, to wear the Heritage home plate, you get all the look. But it's a watch you can.
Yeah, that's crazy value.
Yeah, it is. It's a great looking watch. The attention to detail is good. But also it's in a very contemporary feeling watch, you know, which is perfect and great. I mean, I've had both the Heritage home plate and the Heritage Chrono Blue, and it is you can swim in them, you can, you know, do anything.
Yeah, you're just wearing a vintage style watch, but with all the comforts of modern watches. Yeah,
absolutely. Nobody's going to wear a vintage home plate
you would be crazy to do it. I know some people who would maybe do it, but I wouldn't. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, particularly the home plate. Those home plate dials are very fragile, so you definitely don't want any moisture gain in one of those.
No, definitely not. And talking about swimming and diving with watches, if you had to choose like from all the Tudor Chronos, which one would you pick as your holiday watch?
As my holiday watch, good question. The Black Bay Chrono Dark.
Yeah.
I've always been a fan of, and I think I am quite rare in this regard, but I've always been a fan of the PVD coated watches. I always liked them. I mean, I know the collector community was divided, quite significantly divided. Probably most people preferring not to have one of those watches. I always really liked them. Whether it was Project X or Bamford and Sons or Pro Hunter. To me, they were a cool reimagining of the watches, and I think it was really fascinating when Tudor released the Black Bay Dark, which was the first the PVD coated version of the Black Bay, essentially the watch you're wearing now. But the in-house movement. For me, that watch on the grey fabric strap was killer. I remember when it came out, they very kindly lent me one to write a review on, and I loved that watch. And so when the limited edition PVD Chrono came out, it was a watch that for me was the perfect modern Tudor. I really agree. If I had to pick one for my holiday, I would maybe think picking about the Heritage Chrono in blue and orange. I think I can already see myself on the beach in the south of France or Mallorca with a cocktail next to the water looking at that watch. That would be great too. I mean, currently we're all in lockdown. It's quite cold and wet here in the UK. The thought of that watch and a glass of very cold white wine on the beach in the south of France is currently very, very appealing. Yeah, I think too. And if you had to pick one which, if you look at it, you completely fall in love with again, maybe a vintage one? Home plate, always. Yeah, 7031. I often have this conversation with people, which do they prefer? A lot of people like it with the brushed steel bezel. It's a lovely looking watch, but for me, I just like the way the black bezel sits on the watch and kind of almost finishes it off and gives it that definition on the wrist. Yeah, I like it. As I say, I like it on the bracelet, but I think it's a great watch to wear on leather and even a NATO strap as well. Yeah, like the one you are on a grey NATO. Yeah, and like the one you have on yours. Actually, a prototype Bulang and Sons strap. With the orange stitching. So it's like grey punch suede with orange stitching, which I think is... I actually wear it on a much more recent Tudor deployment clasp. I really like deployment clasps. I also put one on my Datejust leather strap. Yeah, cool. It's great. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, that's a cool watch. We had both recently and I put them side to side, and I think also the black one just really pops out a little bit more with the black bezel. I think it's really cool. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, perfect. But they're great watches. They are very wearable, important in the history of chronographs now. Yeah, and one of a kind, definitely. Yeah, they're different. They're very different to anything else out there, and certainly for me, the story of them right back from 1970 to today. So last year was the 50th anniversary, and crazy. It's a great watch. Yeah, I think too. It's one of the coolest. Yeah, no question. Perfect. I think I'm going to wear this one today as well. Yeah, you should. Really cool. You should. Is that, what would you choose if you had to choose one vintage one to wear? I think they're both really cool, but for me, the home plate too. Yeah. It just has that little bit more funkiness than the Monte Carlo has, I think. Yeah. I would go for the home plate too, and also with the black bezel, I think. Yeah. The steel one is really cool. Funky enough, I prefer a steel bezel on a 6265 more than on the 6263 with the Bakelite bezel. But on this one, I prefer the black bezel. Yeah, okay. Yeah, actually, do you know, I think I would agree with you on that. Yeah? Yeah. I think because it's a smaller watch as well.
Yeah.
I think that for some reason 6265 it makes the watch wear a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, really cool. I really enjoyed this. I really love that we talked about this, because I think it's really important that people know more about these watches.
Yeah, definitely. We should do it on dive watches.
Yeah, we should do one on dive watches too.
Yeah, right back from the early Big Crown up to the modern Black Bay. We could do that. Cool.
Really cool. Yeah. Thank you, mate. I really enjoyed this conversation.
It's
I hope to see you soon again in Rio.
Tudor. Yeah, I'll be over as soon as I can get on an aeroplane.
Yeah, that would be great. And I want to visit Liverpool too, to see you again.
Yeah, anytime. You're welcome, anytime.
Yeah, perfect.
Great.
All right. See you next time. Thank you for joining me.
See you next time.
Thank you all so much for watching this episode of Berend Talks Watches. I was very happy that Tudor collector Ross Povey joined me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Also check out his Instagram account and website, Tudor Collector. And make sure you check out our magazines at the website about Tudor Chronographs too. Hope to see you next time and stay safe.